Welcome to Corralling the Chaos podcast, where we talk publicly about the things you're worried about privately. My name is Angela Leah, and I'm your host. This is the event industry podcast for companies and crew, where we're going to dive deep into things like, what does our industry need that it just doesn't have? What are the things you want to know, but you're just too afraid to ask? And what are the biggest opportunities ahead for our industry? We're going to go deep, and nothing is off limits.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Corralling the Chaos. I'm your guest host today, Jess Cook, and today I'm very excited to be joined by Will Curran. As the founder of Endless Events, creator of the Event Profs community, and host of the event industry podcast Event Icons, Event Brew, and Event Tech podcast, Will has been named one of the most influential people in the meetings and events industry. He has been producing in-person, virtual, and hybrid events since high school, so I'm really excited to hear about that when he started his first company. And now has worked in the management of large events with clients like Emerald City Comic-Con, Anheuser-Busch, Warner Brothers, Morton Salt, Uber. You've probably heard of a few of them. His team's mission is to simplify the event planning process by creating the equation for an event's perfect solution. Will, welcome to Corralling the Chaos.
Thanks so much for having me, Jess. I'm so happy to be here. Hopefully we get to drop some knowledge bombs and blow some people's minds.
I can't wait. That's amazing. First, Will, let's hear a little bit about Endless Events and how you got started and got into the events industry.
Ooh, well, it's a very, very long story, so I'll try to give the abbreviated version of it. I actually started Endless when I was in high school. So it started as a DJ company. Basically, I was like DJing backyard parties, moved on to middle schools. Eventually, I got to college and basically discovered high school dances and college events and realized it kind of sucked. My high school dances sucked. So basically, I brought like large scale production basically to high school and college events. So basically by, creating that amazing experience, we like blew up and grew really, really fast. And that's where I learned everything I needed to learn about production because I was hiring these production companies and I was talking to them about like, what is a line array? What is why do we hang the LED screen this way? All that sort of stuff. And like LED screens were just starting to become popular, I think back then too. And, basically I learned a lot about production, but realized like 80% of my revenue was production. And that, I saw this kind of trend towards laptop DJing starting to happen. So I was like, okay, I think we want to like phase out being a DJ company and become a production company instead. So we bought all our own equipment, bought a warehouse, all that fun stuff, and basically started a production company. We started doing that for a while and then started moving into corporate events because we realized like, hey, like our professionalism and our culture and things like that were really, really great for that. And then kind of where we started to see a massive amount of growth was when we started doing a lot of content marketing, which is where a lot of people know about us. Some people don't realize that we were an actual event company, not just a content creator. But basically, we were writing blogs, we were doing tons of social media, we started our podcasts, all that fun stuff, and basically started growing nationwide and doing events all over the country. Right around that time too, people started talking to us more about event technology. We got passionate about registration systems, about beacon tracking, all that fun stuff, basically everything outside of just the general production stuff. So we started really evolving to more like a all encompassing event technology company. Well, during that time too, we also started getting asked to do a little bit more than just production, but we always like try to stay away from being an event management company because so many of our clients were event management companies. Well, boom, the pandemic happens. And because we're positioned so well with all of our content and everything like that, we basically saw like a tremendous amount of growth. We grew like 400% in 2020. And basically, everybody was coming to us for the event technology. We'd been producing hybrid and virtual events for so long. Everyone just kind of knew us as the people to kind of go to when it came to that. And, during that time, when you're doing a virtual event and you're an event technology company, you're really doing the entire event. You're basically an event management company at that point. So we made the position and started transitioning to kind of realize what we had already been for many years, which was starting to do full event management services. So now as Endless, we would describe ourselves as a full scale event management company. And basically we do everything soup to nuts, from the technology, which we're really well known for, to the strategy, to the nuts and bolts of putting people's heads in beds and all that fun stuff. So that's basically kind of the long story short of it all. Along the way, created lots of content and kind of made a name for myself in the influential space that is event trends. And that's mainly, I think, the life story of Endless today.
That's incredible. I love hearing how content marketing and just marketing in general really gave you that leg up and was
For
kind
sure.
of the saving grace in the pandemic. I think that's a relatively new skill for a lot of event production companies, and so it's really cool to hear how well that worked for you.
Yeah, I mean, like, it literally it's what positioned us perfectly during that time, like, I remember it was, like, March or April of 2020 or something, like, we got, like, 1,500 RFPs in, and that literally wouldn't have been possible without all the content that we were doing for sure.
That's amazing. Speaking of content, I took a look at the case studies that were on the Endless Events website. And you're doing end to end stuff, like from creative concepting right down to AV, show calling for these like really huge household names, everything from corporate conferences, big brand experiences. How do you structure Endless Events? How do you structure the business so you can handle such diverse events and experiences?
Well, I think the first thing is you gotta have great people. I mean, like, that's the thing that everyone's gonna tell you, is that having really awesome people. I think the other thing is too, is, like, creating a space for flexibility in a lot of ways as well. That's one of the great things is that because we have such a talented team and very diverse skill set of team, we're really capable of doing almost anything in the entire world. So I think that really, really helps when it comes to the structure of things. I think the flexibility within Endless is really built into the culture of, who we are. We went remote in 2000, what, like way before pandemic, like I think 2014, 13, 14 or something like that. So we were really always, I think, capable of being able to scale up and scale down very, very easily because we were used to remote communication. We were used to working with teammates that maybe we haven't even met in person. We worked really well with, I think working with clients that we had never even met in person and communicating and planning events without having had seen the venue and all those things like that. So I think that's what really, really helped a lot in being able to structure the team in the right way is that flexibility and not feeling like there's this corporate rigidity. But what's really interesting is most people don't realize is like Endless is also very system and process oriented at the same time. So while we have a lot of flexibility, we also are really driven by documentation, by having very specific processes that lead to customer satisfaction. And that's what really, I think, leads to the outcome of all of our clients being so happy.
I'd love to hear a little bit more about the systems and the processes. Like, what's one example of that you think has really just made things more efficient and streamlined for your team?
Yeah, definitely. For us, the documentation piece was probably one of the most critical pieces. So we use a tool called Slab. It's kind of like a Notion, if you've heard of Notion. It's basically like your internal Wikipedia. I like Slab because it's definitely designed for documentation. It's not trying to do like all the database stuff that Notion's really trying to do. But one thing I love about it is that whenever you write a document in it, you can set an expiry date. You can say in a year, whoever owns this document check back on this to make sure it's still up to date. And if they don't update it or re-verify it in that case, then it shows as expired. So you constantly know what is your well-documented stuff really, really easily. So Slab's been killer for us. And really, honestly, I think in the beginning when we started doing documentation, I think you're going to get a lot of pushback from employees. Why am I writing down how to do this when someone else is going to come and do this job afterwards? Like, why should I do that? And then it becomes, I'm too busy from work. Once they start to see the value, they go, I'm too busy my actual work. I don't have time to document. But then once you've been doing it so long and you really build up this massive database and new employees come in, and then that's how they learn and they know where to find the information. The culture becomes that everybody's so appreciative of it that everybody wants to help make the content and the documentation better. So yeah, documenting things and having step-by-step guides, having kind of like baseline rule sets for things. And like this is moving beyond just the typical, yeah, write your culture code, write your mission, vision, values, have your handbook in there. We're talking like, if even if you're doing a job that's super complex, and I know a lot of event people say, well, there's so much difference and there's a lot of skill that comes into it and things like that. But there are baseline things that you do that make things just go that 2%, 3% better. And I think that's really where it makes a big difference. So you talked about like the case studies. That was like one of my favorite processes to document because like I found this perfect process to writing it. And you'll notice with a lot of the case studies, in fact, we're like just rehauled that entire process. So a lot of the new ones coming out are going to look totally different, but a lot of them have that same formula. It starts with, a lot of stories with the clients and mixes in stories with the employees. And then usually there's like wills sprinkled all in it. And usually I'm the glue that kind of helps fill in the extra gaps to create a complete narrative. But a lot of the shots look exactly the same and things like that because we found that those were super successful and they're super engaging. They had long view times. So the documentation was, I think, was really, really key as one of the first things. I think the other thing is automation. So we really love software at Endless. So we use a lot of software to automate things. So for example, employee onboarding. I hated setting up Google accounts, Slack accounts, having to set up the Lasso account for every employee over and over and over again, right? And I wanted to make it where I could like streamline it, where like the person signed the contract, boom, their accounts got made, they got a welcome email, it gave them the tasks of what they had to do. Like the things that like I was doing over and over and over again that didn't really use my mindset and my mind power. I wanted to automate those. So like we use tools like Rippling, for example, to do all of our payroll and automation. It automatically installs antivirus software on the computer. If the employee's being offboarded, it wipes their computer, it deletes their accounts, all that fun stuff. And then other ways like using HubSpot, for example, for all of our automation of all of our, CRM processes, our marketing processes, and things like that. Like a lot of this stuff can be automated, and I always want to try to find a way to save that 5-10% of time, because we're in a very like labor intensive industry. So the more you can save labor time and make people's jobs easier, it frees up more time to do the things that are actually making you money, and all that fun stuff. So I
It's
think
that
those are probably two keys.
it's that 5 or 10% of time that puts you ahead of anyone else that could consider themselves a
100%.
competitor.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
for sure. I want to read a little expert excerpt of something that you wrote that really stood out to me. I think it'll stand out for our listeners. So I'm just going to read it. During the pandemic, we saw a change of leadership. Those who weren't tech savvy retired or moved into different careers, and those who knew how to use technology to create great experiences, knew how to use technology to communicate, and knew how to use technology to grow their businesses thrived. So, what do you think event companies should take away from that insight? Like, what specific kinds of technology should they be getting on board with to grow and thrive? We just talked about automation. Like, where should they be looking to apply that technology?
Yeah, so I've gotten lucky that like I've gotten to interview so many different event professionals over the years through event icons. And like in the beginning when I started the podcast, it was this move away from the binder. It's time to embrace Google spreadsheets and Excel and all these things like that. And then now it's like if you're using a binder, you're like, well, definitely in dinosaur ages now at this point. And like now I'm trying to move people away from Google spreadsheets and Excel documents to more streamlined tools. So, what I think about it when it comes to that technology piece is that it's the thing that you're going to use again to optimize and save you a ton of time. And the thing is that if you're not utilizing that technology, someone else is. And that's going to allow them to do two things. Either they're going to be more profitable than you because they're doing more work with the same amount of money, or they're going to undercut you when it comes to pricing because they're able to do more work for less money. So I think when it comes to the technology piece, when the pandemic, it kind of forced everybody to do this, right? Like if you didn't know what Zoom was or using Zoom and you felt frustrated by the process that is Zoom, you probably retired at this point, right? And for some people, I'm not talking also just about like Zoom fatigue and the preference of video calls versus in person and things like that. It's just purely your ability to adapt into this situation and feel calm going into a video call. So I think like those sort of things are always what's happening to us. What's amazing is right now we're feeling that exact same thing happen, but it's not just affecting the events industry. It's happening the entire like multiple industries, and that's this like large language model AI movement that you're hearing. Things like ChatGPT, OpenAI. Right now, you're kind of at this point where you don't have to use these tools, right? There's no like pandemic or there's no robot overlords telling you to take to these things. So I think a lot of people right now are like, yeah, I'm not really gonna worry about it. Oh, that I don't really like this AI stuff and where it's going. They're arguing about like the ethics of like generated AI images and things like that. They're getting stuck in the past. And I see this exact same thing happening. So, like, I believe right now, if you're not using a tool like ChatGPT or Bing as a new search engine, you're not using these large language models and figuring out how to streamline and save you that 5-10%, someone else is going to. And it's not that, like, the thing I keep hearing is like, it's not that a robot's going to take your job. It's that somebody who uses the robot is going to take your job. So I think that's really like where it feels very, very similar is that you have to embrace technology and otherwise you're gonna get left behind. And I can tell you, I'm like extremely tech savvy. Like I'm the dude who's like always looking for the best app and will replace an app in a heartbeat, right? Like I changed my entire password manager, which is like the biggest process ever, because I wanted like 5% better improvement, right? But when I see things that are massively changing and I start to feel behind when it comes to things like AI and all these large language models tools, like get ready. It's gonna change everything.
Yeah, I heard a podcast the other day that they said something to the effect of we're in a printing press moment.
Hmm.
Right? I mean, it's
Hmm.
that big. And so even just to get in there and familiarize yourself, play around a little bit so that it doesn't feel so foreign.
Yeah.
And try to find ways that, yeah, it can just save you a little bit of time here and there so that, hey, the time comes when you absolutely have to have it because everyone else is now using it. Like you're at least comfortable.
Totally. The analogy that I use is like, everyone knows the Steve Jobs quote where he said like the computer is like the bicycle for the mind. All these large language model tools and AI, it's like handing a Ferrari to your mind. It's no longer do you have to pedal hard and work for like a couple hours to go where you want. You literally just press go on the pedal and choose the direction it goes, and you're going to be there in an instant.
Absolutely. Will, you yourself are a brand. You've done a ton of work to grow a personal following on LinkedIn and YouTube and Twitter. How has that helped Endless Events grow? I think we see this kind of new trend of personal branding and using it in a way to help you grow your business and using your employees' personal brand as a way to grow your business. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about that and any tips you have for people, event company owners looking to build their own personal brand to help their company grow.
Yeah, for a long time, like Will and Endless were the exact same thing. And I think that can be good and bad in a lot of ways. It's good because like basically all the energy you're putting into yourself, you're also putting into your company. But at some point too, like you also want to build your personal brand because you want to take advantage of probably one of the greatest marketing tools that exist, which is education and helping teach people. And, like we talk about the podcast, we talk about blog posts where people quote you and link back to your website, which is great for SEO. You talk about, your ability for people to then see you as an expert. So then they think, hey, if Will's an expert, I want to hire his company. They're full of Wills. We want to hire these guys to do their events. One of the things I think that is really, really powerful when you build your personal brand, and this is what I kind of recognized early on, is shouts to Alex Plaxton, who I think really encouraged me to do this because he was a very, very popular speaker in the events industry. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to build like a little website. I think I owned Will Curran for many years, but never really did anything with it. But I built a little mini website where I put like my top 2 sessions that I was doing, my bio, and like a couple links to my social. And I wanted to make sure that people knew like Will Curran existed outside of Endless. And I think sometimes when you are doing your personal brand is the same as your company's brand, it can create spaces where it's awkward for in this case events to hire you to speak, because they might have a sponsor who does what you do, all these things like that. And if it's only they have to go through Endless to do all these things, it feels like sponsored content and you get in this kind of weird space. But hiring Will Curran to speak, people will do that all day long. So one thing that's been really, really successful for me on the personal branding side of things is focusing on speaking engagements. I found that like my personal brand is of like high energy. I like to think that I'm smart. I don't think I'm always the smartest person in the room, but like I like to think that I'm smart and I got some cool things to share. I like being a little controversial. And I just like also just like bringing that energy. So like I kind of pair that together and people love it. And they go, oh, we got to talk to Will. We got to have him on a podcast. We got to have him at a speaking engagement. And what's so great is that gets me then in front of my target audience. And prior to us being an event management company, we were targeting a lot of planners. Now we're targeting a lot of planners internally. We're event marketers internally at companies, but it gets me in front of the places that they're going to be at conferences. I can educate and help them and give value. But then they come up to me and go, "Oh my gosh, can you just please help me with this? I don't know what I'm doing." And that's again, like you saw that with us and getting 1,500 RFPs during the pandemic, is that by getting ourselves out there, people then came and associated the brand back to me. And so, a lot of things I'll do is do like now I do QR codes. I tried to do QR codes before the pandemic, and people were like, "What the heck is this black box?" But now, like, you put a QR code on the screen, everybody busts out their phones and scans it. But I do that to have people download additional content if they want to reach out and get consulting from our company, or if they want to hire us to do all their event management, they can do that really, really easily. And so, it's been really killer for me to focus on like building Will Curran too. And let's be honest, as a business owner, I also want to build my personal brand because as much as like you're in it right now, at some day and age, you're going to need to hire someone to replace you as CEO and for you to kind of make that new threshold. And if you are your brand, you then don't have anything you can build upon for your next project. So that's what's been really great for me. So a lot of people actually don't know this. This isn't necessarily public knowledge, but like in December, I actually hired someone to delegate my role as CEO to, and I finally hit that after 16 years. I can finally exit my business. I still own it. I still do all the help with all the content. I'm still super active in the vision of the company, but for me, like it's allowed me now to leverage my personal brand for my next project, which a lot of people are starting to see that I built this event profs community. It's basically a community built upon all the influence and the personal branding I've then put in, and now I have a second option, a second business to move towards that isn't just endless events, which is really great.
That's amazing. What advice would you give to someone who's like, okay, I want to give this a go. I've seen other people do this. I think, I have things to share. What's one piece of advice you would give to someone just starting out?
So you got to own the Google result for your name. So, your LinkedIn page needs to be on there. I highly recommend if you don't already own your name.com, like own, willcurran.com and get a website up there, put a box that says you're hireable for speaking engagements. And as you start to do this content and stuff, people will Google you. They'll see this and then they'll go, "Oh, Will was so awesome in, Lasso's podcast. We gotta have him like come to our conference." And I want to make it easy for them to then see the clear path to being able to me then create another speaking opportunity engagement on there. So I think that's huge. I think the other thing too is just like everyone's going to obviously tell you to post content on social media and things like that. Don't try to be everywhere all at once. Like I concentrate a lot of my energy on LinkedIn. But when it comes to when you're doing that, don't be afraid to be a little controversial too. I think a lot of people play it safe and they're afraid that, oh, if I say this one thing or I talk about this one topic, I might, make people upset. Like there are definitely some things that you like common sense. Let's avoid them as much as possible. But one thing that having the podcast Event Brew has taught me is like now we're on 3 years of doing this. I said the craziest shit on that podcast. And sorry, I cussed on your podcast. I
No,
don't know if
go
I'm
for it.
allowed to cuss or
We're
not.
for that here.
But
It's okay.
we say like the craziest things. I've never got an angry email. I've never got someone say, "I'm no longer going to be your customer." But plenty of people say, "Thank you for finally telling how it really is." And that's probably gotten me more customers and more respect than ever playing it safe and saying the same things that everyone else is saying.
100%. And probably more of the right customers, because if they align with maybe that controversial take that you have, they're much stickier customers, right? They're not wishy washy. They believe in what you believe in. And so they already see the value of what you provide at endless events.
Absolutely.
That's great. You're absolutely a trendsetter. It's very clear. I would be remiss not to touch on trends with you for a minute. I
Ooh,
know a
let's do it.
frustration that you mentioned when we asked you to be a guest on the show was that, and I'm doing the air quotes for anyone listening, everyone does it the way they did in 2019.
Oh, yeah,
And I
yeah, yeah, yeah.
loved that. So, what trend or trends is the industry ignoring right now? And what should they be doing to get ahead of them?
Yeah, I think the big thing is like recycling budgets, like doing the exact same structure of budget, putting the same money in the same buckets that you were in 2019 or even, your last year's event. So I think like the biggest thing is like no one's really like scrapping and being like, what do we have to do to rehaul our entire event? So here's a great example. I think C2 Montreal is considered like one of the most innovative business conferences in the entire world. And for years they've been in the same location doing the same event. Oh, like, and they're innovative too. So this is what's crazy is they're like considered so innovative, but they're always doing the same place. What they decided to do is they said, well, we're not just C2, like that's the name of the company, but we're Montreal as well. So how can we highlight the city? So they moved the entire event into the city center and are now incorporating large groups of the city. So people are literally walking around, experiencing the culture, experiencing the food, And I think that's really, really impactful. And I think it's their ability to constantly be thinking 5, 6 steps ahead of for everybody that's making it so then they're constantly pushing the envelope. So like a common trend that I tell people is that you need to be like not just thinking outside the box, you need to crush the box. So that means like if you're spending a ton of money on catering, get rid of it, right? And I'm sure a lot of people out here are agency owners and things like that too. So you're like, yeah, why the heck does my client spend so much money on catering? Well, the thing is that us as an industry, we need to push and encourage our clients to experiment and take risks because we're in an industry where Murphy's Law is so commonplace that like something is going to definitely go wrong. So we minimize as much as possible for risk and potential problems and things like that. But the problem is that if you keep doing things over and over again the same way, you might see a slight decline the next year in attendance. Then the next year might see a little lower. And the problem is that everybody then attributes this to things like, oh, everyone's just coming back from COVID. Maybe, we lost a little bit of our attendees. Then the next year it's, oh, maybe it's the economy this year. But before you know it, you lost 30, 40% of your attendees and your experience at your events. Before you know it, your event's going to be dead. And so I'm telling people, like, you got to be pushing the envelope for what's possible when it comes to that. Let me try to give another one because that one's very, very planner focused on there. I think the other thing is, we need to also be prepared that this year specifically, like marketing is changing. And however you were marketing your business pre-pandemic, during the pandemic, and then immediately after, you also need to change it again. I think that like for example, we were talking about content marketing. I actually think that content marketing is kind of hitting a point where like it's kind of stale now in a lot of ways. It's really, really hard to do because so many people did it. When I was, doing event icons, I was like one of 5 active podcasts. Now there's like 30. And you're like, Jess, you're killing it. You're like hosting better than I've ever hosted a podcast ever in my entire life. So I'm like, oh man, maybe I need to maybe do a little bit better job on my podcast. Right. And so like the thing about it is I think that most people, it used to be that you could put an ebook up, people downloaded it, you could call them up and say, oh, you had this challenge? Well, here's how our company's a solution. And people would be like, wow, amazing. Now people are like, I don't know about you, but I block all unknown callers. I barely ever talk to anybody on the phone. I want to just text all the time. If people try to come in at me out of the blue with a sales proposition, I'm usually like, hey, I would come to you if I wanted this, right? And so I think for a lot of people, they have to recognize that that's a big trend happening. So that's just one example. However, because content's so good at building brands and loyalty to brands, I don't think you should stop doing it, but it's not going to generate the leads it used to be. So we need to be thinking about like, what's the future of marketing? And I don't have necessarily the answer for this yet because there's not enough data and a lot of these ideas haven't been around long enough. But the big things I'm seeing are partner marketing. So partnering up with a bunch of companies, sharing leads with each other, doing, active exchanges where, hey, if you refer me my customer, I'll help you get another customer and I'll maybe give you, a referral fee and things like that. Doing co-joint marketing efforts on there, right? That's one thing that's super successful. The other thing is I think community marketing is huge right now. People are looking for places to ask questions, get help, all these things like that. And I think it's brands' ability to give people a space that they can then talk with is what's going to create a deeper alignment with that as well. I'm seeing a lot of good positive results from outbound marketing, which is wild because it's the complete opposite of inbound marketing. And I've been permission based for so long, but I think a lot of people are open to the idea of, sometimes out of the blue, I've never heard this brand before, at least now I'm aware of it. And then I think the last little bit that's been really, really successful when it comes to marketing is, just doing, I think, like doing individual ideas that take a lot of effort, but then might push you into another market. But those things aren't like necessarily scalable. You have to get really creative. You have to think really uniquely about it. It's not like as systematized as like content marketing can be. And it's not systematized as, outbound marketing can be in a lot of ways. But that's what I'm seeing a lot of success in. So I think for a lot of people in trends wise, like we have to think about how marketing is totally changing. I'll add one last thing. Events are an amazing tool for marketing as well. And it's funny because we're in the events industry, so we don't think sometimes like how events are actually successful, but we're doing it for our clients and they're seeing so much success. So consider potentially doing an event for your own company as well. And maybe also preaching to a lot of these customers, if you're working directly with a brand or a marketing team or something like that, you got to increase the value because these events are working really, really successfully and are becoming really, really critical for a lot of companies' core marketing plans.
That's amazing. Fantastic predictions. You heard it here first, folks. Will Curran, human, magic 8 ball, crystal ball. Yeah, remember that. Will, I think we're finally, it feels like, back in a place where people are ready or maybe even like ravenous for in-person events. And I think what we have seen and what our customers are seeing, what I've seen personally is clients and attendee expectations are through the roof, all-time high, right? They're ready to get back out there. They, like you said, they don't want the same old things. So, what can event production companies do to leapfrog some of those very, very high expectations?
Yeah, I mean, like production value can be huge right now, right? So like I'm finding that a lot of the events that don't really have great high production values are tending to be the ones that people are kind of forgetting about. You know, in the initial like 2021 kind of timeline, people were just so excited to be in a room. You could have put them in a room with bright lights on, it could have been no music, just put a bunch of high dales, and they've been just happy to see each other in person. But that's changing now because now they've gone to a couple events. They started seeing, that event wasn't really worth my time. And I think that attendees are more critical than ever about events. I, for one, have totally changed. I used to go to so many different conferences and try to be everywhere all at once. And now I go to one single industry conference and that's it. Because like I want to be so particular about my time that I want to be super duper, successful when I'm spending that time. I think a lot of attendees are now doing that as well, especially the ones who don't like to travel. They don't like to travel. They're like really trying to cut back on where they go. So I think focusing on production value can help a ton. I think the other thing too is that we have to recognize that content is no longer the main purpose of especially conferences for corporate events. But obviously, like a music festival, the content is everything because that's why people are there. It's the music. But like when it comes to a conference, a lot of people are starting to wonder, why should I fly all the way across the country to watch a talk I can watch on YouTube?
Yes.
So what used to be, and again, like I owned a production company, so like I totally know what this is like. You wanted to have as many speakers as possible. You wanted to have this amazing, smooth running show. But I think for a lot of events, like where they shouldn't be spending their money is dropping $1 million on a GS for 5 speakers. Maybe instead having like one big speaker the whole conference and spend the rest of the time for people interacting, building upon that knowledge and things like that. I feel like that's really where the future is rather than like let's stuff content down people's throats because people can get content, I think, anywhere. So I think for production companies, the more that you can create experiences that are less about content, and that are more about facilitating things like networking and interaction and integration of learning, the more that they can start to take what they've learned and actually do something with it. I think the ones that are going to make the events more sticky and that they're going to feel like, hey, this was worth me flying across the country, spending $400 for registration, $1,000 for hotel, $400 for my flight, and then plus a bunch of food and all that fun stuff, plus loss of work, right? And then I think the last little bit of it too is that remote work has really changed a lot of ways. So I've been preaching this for many years because we've been remote for so long, and I've been just selfishly wanting this. But consider creating spaces at the events that allow people to work. So I call this like a co-working space. So you can do this by working with your local furniture company, set up a bunch of tables, make sure there's lots of outlets so everyone can charge, maybe some hardwired internet for the people who have to upload big video files and all that fun stuff, and make it a place where people can do calls, where people can get some work done. And, I think that's where people are really going to be craving for. If you don't do that, they're going to go back to their hotel rooms and they're going to end up just doing the work in their hotel room. And at that point, you've lost an attendee. Has anyone ever gone back to your room just to get a little bit of work done? And then before you know it's 5 o'clock and you're like, the whole conference is over. That's literally, I think, what's going to be happening a lot more often now. So I would encourage production companies to be thinking about how they can create those spaces for people to continue their work on the road.
I think that's so smart that you said that. It's something I'd never thought of, but something I've absolutely experienced, right? I go to a conference now, and I think before the expectation was, oh, Jess is at a conference. We're not going to hear from her for a few days. And now it's Jess is at a conference. I bet in between, talks, she'll hop back on and make sure this thing's ready to go, right? The expectation is
100%.
there that we're always wired. So I love that idea. I think that's so smart to just give people that space and kind of respect the era that we're in now of remote work. That's
For
great.
sure. And adding in lots more white space, I think, too. Like it used to be that we tried to cram it where it's like, come into the GS, go to breakouts, go to lunch, come back to GS, go to breakouts, end with GS. But now it's like people really need that space again to digest, but also too like people I think are craving that space that yeah, the expectations to change. They might need to go step out for a meeting, but people can go and have tons of white space and still absolutely love what they've done and been that experience that they've had.
Absolutely. Will, I'm going to ask you one last question. This is something we ask all of our guests,
Sweet.
and we love the answers we get. So, what do you hope for our industry?
Ooh, hope is a dangerous thing, right? Um, you know what I think I hope for in the industry, I'll pick like a really, really big chewable thing that I think that, I can talk about like I hope that everyone gets more technologically advanced and things like that. I think that's starting to happen. But for me, if I picked a really big topic, I hope that we as an industry can continue all the efforts we had prior to the pandemic in DEI efforts and also sustainability efforts. I think a lot of what we're doing right now in the industry is recycling what we've done before and kind of saying, yeah, sustainability is important. Yeah, DEI is important. But then at the same time, we did things like, hey, we got rid of all the hybrid streaming sessions that we had out of our conference. So now, like, all the people who physically or maybe, monetarily couldn't attend our events now can't. That just kills DEI, right? And then same with sustainability too. What if someone's like, I don't want to fly all the way from London down to LA for this conference. That's a big, carbon emission right there. I'd rather attend virtually. Why are we not doing those sort of things? So what I hope for the industry is that, we can move past the initial like, oh, this is what I need to save money, or this is what feels good, or this is what's easy, and we can start to make some of the hard decisions that allow us to, I think, start making some dents in sustainability and DEI.
I love that. Options and accessibility for all, right?
Yep,
Make it
absolutely.
open. I love it. Will, thank you so much for joining us on Corralling the Chaos. It was a pleasure having you.
Thanks so much, Jess. I really appreciate getting to come here and get to drop some knowledge bombs.
Amazing. Thank you all for joining us for another episode of Corralling the Chaos. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please subscribe to follow along. And if you have any questions, we are here to help. Please reach out to us at podcast@lasso.io. We'll see you next time.